call to order the Brattleboro Housing Partnership meeting for today, October 28th. And I have a motion to call to order.
Meeting of October 28th, 2024.
Great.
I'll second it.
Great, thank you. So we'd like to start this meeting with a resident citizen participation, answer any questions. So the floor is yours.
So she mentioned the locks and how much it's gonna be, and have you guys looked into like the ball things, like the cameras? I mean, yeah, talking about cameras, not locks, cameras.
Yeah.
They have these ball things that go in it.
She sent me a hard time hearing, so if you could just try to speak into that.
Oh,
It's right there.
so this morning we were talking about the cameras and how expensive they are. I was wondering if there was a way that they could cut that budget somehow by doing maybe, I don't know if they looked into it, but like a camera that goes, it's like a ball, and it goes in a more, like a radius. I don't know, I'm just curious on if that could be cut into something cheaper.
So to speak to
Sooner.
her concern, yeah. So we had an appraisal to have all of the cameras done here, also at Moore Court, to have cameras put up at both sites. And for just Hayes Court, the estimate came in at $70,000. It's a complicated system, and we need to have it so that we can get the information very quickly. I think because these are older buildings, there isn't the infrastructure in them to do it. So we will look at we will definitely look at other ideas and other estimates. And we're in the process of reaching out to additional funding sources to try to see how to fund this. So in giving you that information, it wasn't saying that we can't do it.
No.
It's just saying we really have to, we have to prioritize it because we have other things that we have to prioritize, like all the other, heating and cooling and all the other electric, So in looking at it, that's a huge number for our budget. It's to make a change. So we will be bringing it to the board though. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, good.
No.
Yeah.
And
But we do know that it's a priority. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it up here, so.
Yeah. I'm glad you did. Yeah. Thank you for
It
bringing it up.
is something we really need here. I don't know about the other places, if they could wait. I don't know if there's problems there, like here. Or if there's something else some other way.
Thank you very much. Do you have a question?
How many cameras is that?
It would be a lot. I mean, it would be several cameras in each building. So we have 9 buildings plus the community room. So it would be 9 buildings for each 2 floors. And so front and back cameras, upstairs and downstairs, interior, exterior. I haven't had a chance to really dive into the estimate completely because I got it this morning before our meeting. But I think it's a pretty comprehensive.
I mean, $70,000, you would think that would be a lot.
I know. It's very expensive. It's very expensive. Even, the Arlo cameras that we put up, they're a temporary fix, but we pay for data, we buy the cameras outright, which it's much less expensive, but they're not the quality that we would like. Like things get missed, it doesn't record sometimes, there are some glitches that we would like to prevent. So while I think the cameras we have here now are good, I think we would, this would be a much better system and would be easier to access for ourselves and the police department.
Now, where do you monitor?
They're all in the cloud, so it goes up into the internet, and then we can log in and we can look at it remotely. So I could look at it from my house if I wanted to log in, or somebody else.
I don't know if it all was set up down at the main office.
No, not anymore. Now the technology goes so quickly, you know, so.
Oh, God,
yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
All right.
What about like a winter carnival to raise money?
Yeah, we definitely could look at raising money, for sure. Yeah, it's a great suggestion. I think we could look for fundraising too. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great idea.
To comment more on saving money, I know that Morport and Ledgewood have both discussed drafting windows and doors, and that would help saving on heating bills, like we're replacing all of those and or the seals on them. And I brought it up at the rec meeting several times. And plumbing issues throughout both properties, there's a lot of air in that, so if we got all of the plumbing updated throughout all of the properties, you could save a lot of money there with the water bill alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's the upfront cost that's a little tricky, so.
Well, at the same time, the upfront cost, I think it'd be worth it to put up that more expensive price to be able to fix everything, to be able to save money on that point.
Yeah, we could definitely, I know in the past we've looked at upgrading some of the windows and seeing what the cost estimate were compared to what the cost savings were. We could definitely do more estimates again and see.
And then I have a petition that I wanted to start for the holiday decorating times. How would I go about doing that? Just writing one up and getting a whole bunch of signatures?
You can, that's a policy change, so you
So
could,
how would I, what is the?
So you could write a letter to the board, to BHP and the board, and you could ask the board to relook at the policy in the handbook. Because the
Okay.
handbook is tied to the lease, so it's technically a legal document, so when we make changes to those documents, we bring it in front of the board.
And you guys are the board, I'm assuming?
This
Or
is
is
the
it
board,
someone,
yeah.
a different board higher than you
Yeah,
guys?
no, this is the board of commissioners.
So
yes.
then can I give you the letter that I've written for?
Sure, of course, yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, for Ledgewood, some other people have actually asked me to bring up the washer and dryers. I know that there was a resident that's been there since basically they've been put in, and the money that was collected from washers and dryers was supposed to go into playground maintenance and updating washers and dryers when needed. And the washers and dryers have not been updated in a very long time, and there's only one working of each. And with a facility that does not have regular access to that, where is that on the priority list to be fixed?
So we actually have an estimate to get all the washers and dryers changed. We did it here, and we also did it at Samuel Elliott Apartments. We're going to do it. I don't know if we're going to do it before the April.
Okay.
It might be right after April. I did check into it though when you sent me that information, and they don't seem to be broken as of this time. I don't know if they were previously. And
They
break
still
down.
run, but they're not working. Like the heating elements and the dryers aren't working,
Okay.
and the washers. I mean, yes, they run, but
Okay.
they're
Yeah,
not
there
doing
have
what
been
they're
some
supposed to.
concerns specifically about that property.
Yep.
Because when we upgrade it, they will be different. They won't
Yes.
be the same size. They're going to be smaller, and they're going to be energy efficient. So they're not going to be the same. Although I've gotten a lot of feedback from this property. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that, but I've been asking people at this property and at the Samuel Elliott what they think of the washers and dryers, and they all seem to be pretty happy with them. So they would be getting the same exact one. So it is going to be done. It's in process. I just don't know if it's going to fall in this year's budget at this point because we've had a lot of additional expenses.
Right.
And we've had some really high costs at that property related specifically to legal costs.
Right.
And so, so that property has had the lowest rent payments of all
Right.
the properties. And so when we're looking at how to figure out the budget, we take into consideration that we won't have those large expenses and legal costs. I mean, we'll budget them for them somewhat. So there are some concerns. So I don't know, we wanted to get it in this year's budget and get it done this year. It will also mean that they're going to be closed for a little bit of time.
Right.
And
How are you going to rectify the no washer and dryer situation when it is closed? Are you guys going to make a temporary building
I'll
that.
probably let people know ahead of time so that they can get stuff done ahead of time, and then they'll have to wait till it's open again.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question is insulation throughout Ledgewood and Morport, because, I mean, there's drafting with
Yeah.
more insulation, updating things, saving money.
Yeah, they're great ideas. I would love to do them all.
Mhm.
Financially, they're really hard to do. So we have to take them, like, for example, like when we have let's say we have a situation where we have a roofing issue, that will take priority over some of those
Right.
other things. But we are looking at energy efficiencies, and if we can get extra money from
And or
grants
maybe
or
even
funding.
do one building at a time.
Yeah, it's a possibility, for sure. Yeah.
Christine?
Yeah.
I can attest to the new washing machines there, period. You can adjust the load, you can have a deluxe load, or so you can, if you have a deluxe load, you use more water. You use less soap, you have to remember that. But I really like them, that you can control the amount of water that goes in. So I find the time's different, just have regular load, it's X amount of minutes, but if you have a deluxe load, it gives you some more minutes. You put in 6 quarters, but if you want the dryer to go longer, you put in 7 to get 60 minutes. And they're really working fine. And I like the filters because you're just like on just throughout this, or you just swipe your hand and you take the lid comes out. So I'm very pleased with them.
Yeah, and we have
Washers and
kept them at the same cost. We didn't raise any of the costs. So, but I think what I'm hearing you say is looking at more energy efficiency throughout the properties
Yeah.
and infrastructure, and potential in the laundry room at Ledgewood Heights. So I will tell you, the laundry room at Ledgewood Heights is slated to happen. I just don't
No
know
way.
financially if it'll be in this fiscal year, and our next fiscal year begins on April 1st. So I do know that we'd like to do that as soon as we can. And then with the rest of the infrastructure, those are much, much bigger projects. But I hear what you're saying, and I think you're totally right.
Because I know Morport and Ledgewood both have had issues with black mold due to the air in the plumbing and leaky pipes due
Well,
to pH.
I will say that we get, anytime somebody reports any type of mold, we have it tested, and we do not have that on the property. We might have discoloration and some molding, but then it's rectified pretty quickly. So I hear what you're saying, but I'm gonna stand up against that, because we do send anytime we have that, we investigate, and we do send it to the public safety officer, and we do have people come and see it. So we would love to get all the buildings. These buildings were built
Ages ago, and that's
Ages
why we're having these issues.
Yeah, and public housing doesn't rebuild public housing. So if we are going to redo this, we have to do it in a different way. It might mean changing to tax credit, it might mean redeveloping the properties, but we are in the process of looking at redeveloping Hayes Court and Moore Court. And we're beginning that process. We've already begun that process by trying to get
Have any of
Melrose
those development plans gone out to either residents and or the public?
We're
to be
not at the
covered?
point yet we're not at that point yet, but we are looking at long-term plans to get them redeveloped.
Okay.
But once we do, we'll definitely engage the residents. The first step is to redevelop another property site so that we can move people there temporarily when we redevelop properties.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention something about the black mold.
Yeah.
That there is a particular kind of mold, when people say black mold, which has health, is dangerous for your health. There are other kinds of black colored mildews and molds and things which are ugly, and but they're not a health danger the way black mold is. And so
I mean,
that might be some of the sometimes.
In my own apartment, I did express concern where the fire marshal did end up showing up, and he told me when he went to check it out that there was no positive way to actually make sure it was or was not black mold. So the fact that you said there was testing done to make sure it wasn't, and he's saying that there's
That's
no
what the Department of Health says as well. So we didn't have a confirmation that it was some sort of tox, that it was, and my understanding is it was rectified once we were brought to our attention. Sometimes it's also things like just lack of circulation, air circulation, too much stuff in a room, but it could be also if there was some sort of water damage. So we do rely on our residents letting us know, and then we go in and we rectify it pretty quickly. Yeah. And if you don't get an answer, then keep calling and let me know, and I'll send someone over there.
Any other questions? We do have to move on to the agenda, but I have room for one more question.
You have a question?
No,
You're good?
just
Okay.
here to listen.
Okay, great. Nice to see you.
Great. So, in our board packets, we have the minutes from the last meeting of September 23rd, 2024. I have a potential motion to accept the minutes.
Motion that we accept the minutes for September 23rd, 2024.
A second?
A second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The next is the staff reports review. So, the first report in our packet is the executive director report and materials. Any questions?
No. Yeah.
Okay, I'll speak louder. So the next item is the executive director report in our packet. So if you have any questions or comments, or if you have anything notable, Christine, that you'd like to mention.
Well, I will say, unfortunately, when I wrote this report, it was October 17th. In the early morning of October 15th, we had shots fired on the property before the shooter went downtown and created another serious situation downtown. So I wanted to make the board aware of that. I know I made you aware of it that day as well. But since then, unfortunately, we've had another shooting situation on the property. So some of the things are probably not as relevant, but I will give you a very quick update. So we had a shooting incident on late at night last Wednesday, early morning Thursday, and it caused damage to one of the apartments. Bullets went into an apartment of someone unrelated to the guests who had entered this building. And so the staff had been working to address this safety concerns. We already had things in motion for safety concerns in terms of getting exterior locks for that door of the building, more cameras, more lighting, increased surveillance on the property, and collaborating with the police department. We have since then tried to expedite more of those things. At this point, we are in the process of continuing to collaborate with the police. We brought in the police department twice since last Thursday. Once Chief Hardy came to speak to residents, and then the next day we had the special meeting with the board with Assistant Chief Evans. This is something that we at Brattleboro Housing have been really fortunate not to see as much of until recently. So I think it's frustrating for residents, it's scary for residents. So we're trying to have support staff here to support them, and then also making short-term plans and long-term plans for increasing safety on the property. And some of that includes some big ticket items like cameras and exterior door locks. But I think at this point, it's just what we have to do to make people feel safe. Yeah. But the police have been very engaged in the process, and I will say I was really, I think that they spoke to the severity of this and how this is at that high. This is a high response. This is like a priority to them at this point. So that was really helpful. Other than that, the downtown, I just wanted to follow up. The downtown action plan had spoke a little bit about potentially fining properties that they called high response properties. And so I was really fearful that our residents would then not call the police when we needed them to. And so we really have been doing a lot of campaigning around talking to people about handing out the magnets with the police information of the 3 different phone numbers to call for tip line, emergency response, and then also the non-emergency number. So making sure that residents really have that. And we've been trying to set up events to have police visit properties to answer questions for people. So we started here and Sam Elliott, and then we'll be setting up times at other properties.
Can I ask about I appreciate the letter that you both wrote to the select board. has that, I'm sorry that I don't know for sure whether the whole ordinance has been, has gone all the way through. And did you feel that there's more that the board or that we should do?
No, I think, at this point it did pass, but I think at this point, I'd like to see how this works with what we've been doing. We were assured by the town that since we engaged so much with the fire department and with the police department around safety, and are very proactive, that they were not concerned and that we wouldn't be penalized because we were taking those steps. It sounded to me like they were using it as more of a way of making sure that landlords did engage or property owners did engage. And so far I feel that. I feel like that is true. And I think if we start seeing problems with our Section 8 program, or we start seeing other problems, then I think that might be the time for the board to address it. Yeah.
Any other questions or concerns about the executive director's report? The next item on our agenda is the property manager's report. Any questions or comments?
I guess I just appreciate the information and continuing to, look at the vacancies and who's full and who has vacancies and the amount of time that it's taking Vermont State Housing to respond. And I'm looking forward to, in the next few months, getting a better handle on that. And maybe with the executive director, try to determine if there's like a standardized way of looking at the numbers so we can see the same thing every time. And see if there's anything the board can do to help.
Okay. You mean as in me or the executive director of Vermont State Housing?
No, you.
Okay. Yeah. So what was the information you were looking for? I'm sorry.
Well, just in the future, thinking about sitting down with you maybe and coming up with, what do we want to see a certain number of vacancies in every unit, and maybe is there a way of looking at the amount of time it takes for them to respond, or what are the things that we want to see, month over month.
Yeah. Specifically for Red Clover.
For all the
properties. Okay, yeah, I can do that for sure.
Well, I'd like to, I'm not trying to give you a job.
Yeah, I think that's why I can talk to Courtney about a way to maybe track it in a spreadsheet that's easier than just her monthly report. I don't know if that would be helpful. I'll give you an example. So Red Clover Commons 2, we fill very quickly because David manages the Section 8 program for us. And so he's very quick.
Yeah.
Red Clover Commons 1, we struggle with because of that. A.W. Richards, we have other struggles, which are around, we have very specific requirements for different units. So some have to be some have to be under the 40% median income, right, David? And then some can be some have to be between the 40 and the 60%. So it's hard to sometimes it's hard to figure out those things.
Exactly.
But I would say for our RAD properties, we don't have a problem filling units. That's not, we're turning over units pretty quickly. We've had a lot of turnovers for internal transfers in the last couple of years, which take a lot of time and energy and costs. And we're sort of getting to the point where that is ending, we'll have some here and there, but we had some big family transfers from like a 4-bedroom to a 2-bedroom, and those just take a lot more time and energy and cost. But I think we're seeing fewer and fewer of those. But I can talk to Courtney about what that could look like for you all, and you can see what it looks like. I think with RCC 1, we're just really pushing on Vermont State Housing to try to come up with a different way of doing this, because we know people need the apartments. We know that people are on the wait list, and
That's what I'm
Yeah.
hearing around that. It's got to be extraordinarily frustrating.
yeah, and we have had a lot of conversations with them. Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations with them. So essentially, it feels like we're purging. When we purge our wait list, we have to send letters to everyone and then backup letters, and before we can take them off the wait list. It's a lot of administrative work, but it ensures that people who are on our wait list stay on our wait list and don't get kicked off. It feels like we're doing a purge by sending all these applications. It's also, there's a cost element to it. Every time we're sending these, we're spending a few dollars on every application. And so that is another big cost of ours. Yeah. And, I think that there are some ways, I think we could have a conversation with Vermont State Housing, about it and seeing if potentially what else we can do, but we're trying to do everything on our end as much as we can. Yeah. I don't think we're the only place with the problem, from what I've heard, but I'm not sure. So, but I'll put together some information and then see if maybe someone from Vermont State Housing could potentially zoom into one of our meetings. That might be helpful as well.
Yes.
Yep.
So you spoke about the specific requirements for A.W. Richards, but is there any other reason for those vacancies? Is there any deterrence from the most recent incident there, or just curious if that
No, not
is-
really. It's
no.
just the qualifications, and I think you really start to get into minutia when you deal with tax credit properties, as Christine was saying, depending on income. An example would be that we had a mother and daughter that looked rather positive for a 2-bedroom that we had there as well with our subsidy attached, but then in re-verifying their income, they were over income. They didn't need the subsidy in order to live there, so they didn't qualify. So then we had to go back to square one and start screening another handful of folks to assure that they qualify. So it's a tedious process and timely at the most.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Any other?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask more questions on today. When you said the annual inspection was minimum, is this average basically when you do your inspection for different facilities with VHP, just more for just in general? Was completed, you go to get RCC2 and all of them?
So
pretty much.
we inspect every property annually. Some
Okay.
properties we inspect biannually. David is the inspector for those, except for Red Clover Commons. He might do some because he holds the Section 8 vouchers. Brattleboro Property Management, our occupancy team, Courtney D'Onofrio and Jennifer Short, they're the ones who do all the inspection. And a lot of times we bring in the fire department with us. So we don't have to do them every year,
Oh, okay.
but
Yeah, I
we
just
do
wondered.
them every
Oh,
year.
yeah, I just
And for
wondered.
some properties, we do them twice.
Yeah, how do you do that?
Yeah, and some even get more than that, depending on, if some of our tax credits, some of our, to be compliant, they have to do a select number every year. So Vermont Housing Finance Agency will come in and they will do a select number a couple times a year, and then we'll have, another funding source might come in. Vermont State Housing has to do it for a year. A few might have, might come in as well to do, other inspections, yeah. But for some of our properties, and then we have to do our RAD inspections every other year, and Springfield Housing comes in to do those, so our apartments actually are inspected pretty frequently.
I was just wondering, because did the normal state inspectors themselves come in, or did you?
No, it's not me. It's, it's the fire department, it's our RAD staff and Courtney and Jen, as well as maintenance joins them on the walk as well. And I must say, even in the private rental market, there are those that are in other low-income housing properties such as Windsor or Westgate, but they end up getting 3 inspections a year. because there are random inspections, there are those that are required for tax credit properties, if it's a tax credit, and then if it's a tax credit property that's being subsidized with a Section 8 voucher, then the Section 8 has to go in and inspect as well, so you might as well just have everybody move in with you if you're getting 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to meet the
Works out to
the HUD standards, which are what, David?
The HUD standards in the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program are right now biannually, but we are looking at doing them on a triennial basis, or at any point in time that either the landlord or the tenant requests.
Oh, okay. Because I know if you're a single home, it's usually once every recertification inspection.
Yeah, I'm not sure about those conditions. I am aware that the fire department also will be inspecting all rental properties in the town of Brattleboro, was it once every 4 years as well? So there's another addition if you're a renter on top of tax credit, Section 8, low-income housing, and now Brattleboro Fire Department showing up. So now that's 4 inspections. So we're certainly assuring that people's environments are healthy and safe.
Absolutely.
The next item on our agenda is the Section 8 Administrative Report. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I just walked in around, what is this all about?
Sure.
So this is the Open Brattleboro Housing Partnerships Commissioners meeting. So we host it once a month at various sites. So we go to site, and this month is here at Hayes Court. So we are a group of volunteers who was appointed by the Select Board of Brattleboro, and we support and guide the operations and well, it's really the policies and procedures of Brattleboro Housing.
And the financial.
And the financial. Thank you.
In financial?
Yes.
Thanks.
So the next item is the Shelter Plus, Section 8 and Shelter Plus Care. Any questions on that after review? Okay. So I do need a potential motion to accept the Section 8 utility allowances for 2025 as present. Any notes you'd like to make about that?
I will hand that over to David. That is his expertise.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it's that time of year again, folks, that on an annual basis, all utility allowances as well as fair market rents are adjusted accordingly. And we have those set up on a 12-month term from the first of the year to the end of the calendar year. What you have before you are the proposed 2025 fair utility allowances in blue. And the inceptor of those amounts is the Vermont State Housing Authority that gets out their calculators and people to compare every potential utility cost throughout the entire state of Vermont. Not only do they just cover the entire state, but they also include Brattleboro. So bless their heart, they're doing a lot of this work annually for us as well. So I'm going to share with you that what you have before you in blue on my grid indicates what the new 2025 proposed utility allowance will be. And if you notice, there is a decrease. And in turn, what a decrease in the allowance means is then that the difference is going to be paid by the tenant and not by the housing authority. So an example of that, just to share with you, is that out of the 132 subsidies that we have in place in Section 8, 8 of those participants actually receive an additional utility allowance reimbursement check in addition to our payment of a rental subsidy because of the cost of utilities. Because it's, sure, okay, I'm getting a rental subsidy, but my income is so low and I have to pay for utilities, that you have to help me pay my utilities. So that's what we're doing for 8 of our participants. Some are very low income, some have no income, but they're still responsible for having to pay their electric or their heat or their hot water or their general electricity, lights, things of that nature. So in my calculations of looking at where the future lies with these proposed utility allowances, if we accept the lower amounts, what that means starting in January is that a tenant's share of rent will increase because they are not getting the allowance, the current allowance. So for a 1-bedroom, my rent's gonna go up $132 a year if I get heat, hot water, if I have to pay just for electricity for cooking and electric. If I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, I'm looking at $179 a year more that I'm gonna have to pay for rent because of the utility adjustments, because they're lower, means they can pay more. In short, 21 of our Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher participants have rents with all utilities included. I call that dying and going to heaven. So they don't get an electric bill, they don't get a heating bill, they pay for their internet, they can pay for their cable, but they don't have to pay for the 4 basic utilities of heat, hot water, cooking, and electricity for lights, etc. Which in turn then means that we have 111 folks in Section 8 that do get adjustments on their share of rent based on the utility allowances. So if you choose to adopt the 2025 utility allowances as proposed by Vermont State Housing Authority, 111 Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher holders' share of rent will increase as of January 1st. I have confirmed with our HUD Boston field office if we could continue at the current rate that we have now, and they said, yes, just keep your documentation. So my proposal is that we make no changes to the utility allowance, which in turn will not have a result on the tenant's share of rent, and that we continue in 2025 with 2024 rates unchanged.
So long story short, it will, right? So the amount that they sent, so because the utilities have gone down in cost, they, when they did this market study, the utilities have gone down in cost since they were a year ago. And so Vermont State Housing made the recommendation they're gonna lower what they're gonna contribute. And we have decided, since we have a fewer number and we have more money in our Section 8 reserves, that we can afford to keep it at the same rate. And that way it doesn't impact the tenants who have to pay that portion. Did I say that correctly? Okay.
Oh,
David gave all the really good minutia details, but that is the overall. When we discussed it, David and I, and then he went to HUD. We feel that we definitely can support that in the Section 8 program.
That's good news.
I have a question, since I'm involved in this, should I abstain?
No, you aren't involved in it because this doesn't affect you.
Okay.
This affects only the people who are in the Section 8 program, who are living in the community and pay utilities. The nice thing about being in RAD is we could charge for utilities, but we don't. Because we know that would be a hardship for our residents. So we do not do that. We don't charge for air conditioners, we don't charge for, we don't even charge for the washing machines at Moore Court anymore. We've eliminated that because we knew that it was a cost burden for residents. However, that is something the board can, when we look at these additional high costs, these are things that we could also look at to reinstate some of those things for our residents. But for this, it does not affect the residents that live in our housing sites.
Pat, generally speaking as well, within the town of Brattleboro, there are very few private landlords that include all utilities. There are a few in addition to ourselves, but it's far between.
I should say that A.W. Richards is the only property where they do pay a portion of their electric costs.
So you're saying we can afford to do this because there is some excess in the,
So the
Budget
Section 8
basically.
program has its own, if you look at, when we look at the comparable, it has its own money. Essentially, it has its own account, it's how we keep it separately, and the Section 8 program, we have, we're able to cover this through the Section 8 program easily. Because we're underutilizing our program, because we don't have enough, we can't project base, we haven't project based more yet, and we haven't, we have excess Section 8 vouchers right now that we're having a hard time using because people are having such a hard time finding apartments in the community. Right, David?
Right.
and there aren't other things that we might want to use that money on for Section 8.
We're really limited to what we can use it on, right? I mean, we can raise the rents at the RAD properties, which we will do in April 1st. We can, we've already raised what we can pay for the fair market rent for the community. We did that this year. I mean, we can't use it to like fix buildings or to we can't take that money and then use it somewhere else for something else, right? It's not the same, money.
So it's geared just for that specifically?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Got it.
Okay, so is there any other questions?
Hold on, I'm sorry, they just can't hear because the interpreter can't, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so is there any other questions or comments before we move to make a motion? Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the recommendation of no changes being made to the current 2025 or the upcoming 2025 budget for the utility allowances?
I motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. And so then that's all set. You already approved the fair market rents, and so this will go in effect as we're ahead of the game, David.
So 132 people, thank you.
Thank you for-
133 even.
Thank you for presenting it.
Okay. So we'll move on to the financial review. The first item on the agenda is the September 2024 check listings. Any questions? No? Okay. We'll move on to the 2024 financial comparable for September. That's
I
this
was
one.
looking at that.
That's this one. So I was looking at the reserves that you just mentioned. Where is that?
Section 8.
Yeah, for section 8.
Page 8.
Yeah, but where is it on the, what is it labeled as? Am I just missing it?
Well, right now we have, it looks like right now we have, $2 million, 562, is that correct, David?
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, in
So there's
reserve.
also what you see on your balance sheet, there's also what is called a HUD health reserve
Mhm.
as well. They hold back some of our
Yeah.
assets as well.
And so we have enough funding to have how many vouchers? How many vouchers are we approved for?
225, 230-ish now that we have mainstream in the mix as well as our red clips. So
And how many do we have out?
140, 131, 134, somewhere in there of Section 8 and project based that does not include the RAD property. So we could probably issue conservatively another 60 to 70 vouchers probably, but where are they going to get leased?
Which is why we raised our cap on our project-based vouchers, because it's easier to project-based vouchers and utilize them than it is to try to use Section 8 vouchers in the community. There's just not enough apartments for people to rent,
Housing
and
stock isn't there.
the housing stock isn't there right now. So that's why when we raised our cap from 20% to 50%, we want to project base more of our vouchers to utilize the Section 8 program. The problem is like you see this money and you're like, oh, this is a lot of money. Brattleboro has this, but we can't use this for like things like Maureen is talking about because they're not. It's not the same money, right? And we can only use it for paying these rental subsidies. And so we want to increase the number of people who are in the program. The only way to do that right now in the housing market,
Since they're looking for the Section 8 vouchers, what if you guys got a temporary building? Will you, for the Section 8 vouchers for those people, for like the 70 you said is left over?
What do you mean, 100 a building?
Or, yes, like getting an apartment building that's up for sale within the community and using that with Section 8 vouchers to get use of those so they have the funding and then going and updating the buildings that are needing it.
So,
How would that work? Is that allowed?
It is allowed, but it would have to be through a non-profit organization such as Brattleboro Housing Opportunity Inc. would be the owner of the property. It would have to enter into a 20-year agreement with the Brattleboro Housing Partnerships to project-base X amount of units specific to low-income folks.
So to answer your question, so that's why we did raise the cap. We applied to HUD to get a waiver to raise the cap. We're the only housing authority in Vermont that can do this because we're the only housing moving work agency. We're the only ones that did all that work to be able to make these changes. And so we are planning on project basing vouchers in the Putney project that's still under development. I'm sure that the Daylum Chalet will ask us to project base voucher. They already have, right? And so whenever people are trying to build housing, we try to give that. So we're not the only ones that can provide the housing.
Well, my question is, there's multiple apartment unit buildings already in Brattleboro. That's a good portion of them are empty, and why not use what's already there? And
people can do that. We just can't. We don't have the financial ability right now to just buy a property. We just don't have that. We have to take care of the properties we do have.
Well, that's why I was asking about the amount that is on reserve.
You can't use that to buy a property. You can use
even if it's meant for Section 8. Like,
no, you can't.
Okay.
It's made.
We can subsidize it. We can use that money to help people who are low income, help pay for the rent in that property, but who's the landlord? Who owns that property?
Okay.
It can't be a housing entity such as Brattleboro Housing Partnerships, but it can be an entity such as Brattleboro Housing Opportunities Inc. or Bill and Joe's Landlord Specialty Group or something, but it can't be us directly.
But they're great questions,
Wonderful question. I wish we could.
And we do partner with a lot of housing agencies who are trying to develop properties because part of it is having these subsidies in their properties does help a lot.
Right.
And
That's
so,
why I'm just trying to ask
yeah.
them.
Right.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
So are we able to move on? Any other questions? No? Okay. So for check signing assignments, for November, we have Commissioner Stroud. For December, we have Commissioner Green. And do we need to sign in January?
I'd be happy to do January.
Okay.
And Commissioner Stroud, Commissioner Walker is signing for this week, so you don't have to do this week.
All right,
Okay. Thank you for filling in last week.
absolutely.
Great. Okay, so we're moving on to board business. So we'd like to review the proposed 2025 health insurance contribution for Brattleboro Housing Partnerships employees. So that's this one.
Yep.
Do we have to make a motion for this? Or?
You don't have to decide this month. It would need to get decided. If you don't decide this month, that's okay. It would need to be decided next at our annual meeting, which I know is a little trickier, but you're welcome to wait on it. But if you have any questions about it now, you could let me know. I did talk about it at length. I gave you some information on the back. I talked about it at length with James. So health insurance rates have gone up again, which I'm sure some of you are not surprised about, especially Michelle. It's a significant burden to the agency for sure. However, I do think that providing health insurance for our employees is really essential because our employees, first of all, employee retention is a really important thing at our organization. It takes a long time to get people trained. It takes a long time to get the right people who are good working with our residents and are kind, compassionate, smart people. And so I think it's important. It keeps people here, and I think it's a way of us getting people on board. When I talked about it with James, this increase, we were thinking that there would be an increase, and he was feeling like that the board could potentially pass this now, and then when we do, for year 2025, and then when we do the budget, then deciding how the board wants to proceed, and taking into consideration if they wanted to, change the employee contribution at that time, or, decide on cost of living salary adjustments at that time, how they want to proceed. So it's a hard thing because our fiscal year doesn't run at the same time as this planning does, and so that's always a challenge. But he felt like we could cover this until then and then make that financial decision then. We'll also be raising the rents of the RAD properties then, which will help. We'll be able to raise it under the OCAP, which we did last. We'll now be doing it every April from going forward. So that would be, that would help in planning the budget as well. But we'll have a lot of big ticket items this year for the budget. Like, as we can see, we're looking at additional safety costs and infrastructure costs. So.
Do we need a motion to return to the?
We did have some questions too.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask for additional questions. So just hearing for clarification, so James thinks that we can cover the next 5 months and see if there's any fluctuations, and then we can revisit it and change the employee contribution at that time. Okay. But he's confident that we can cover it.
Yes, we can cover it for sure, but it we'll be over budget of what we decided on. But we can cover it, and then when we get to the next fiscal year, we can see where we're at and then make determinations based on that. Or we could ask for a higher employee contribution starting now, and that would then, it would definitely offset some of the costs.
Because does it seem like no matter what, the employee will be affected either by a higher cost for their premium or their co-pay, or their salary would be adjusted? Like, either way, it will impact them.
It's going to impact them in some way or the other. I mean, it's going to go up a little bit for them as well because it was raised. Their part of the contribution will go up slightly. But the biggest hit will be for the organization, and then and then that will be the determination of how we want to proceed, whether or not we want to proceed with adjusting the salaries, seeing what we can do for the salaries, and if we have to have a higher increase for tenant contribution.
How often do we look and see if there's another health insurance carrier? I know you can possibly do it every year.
We do look at it. When we looked at, we have a person from the Richards Groups that works with us, and they have looked at different health insurance plans. Blue Cross Blue Shield is just so much more expensive than this, so we've been opting for the MVP. There are other plans that we could look at, and we could certainly have someone from the Richards Group come and give us this information. When we looked at the plans, there really didn't seem to be anything that was comparable to what we were already getting that was significantly less. The only thing we could do potentially would be like to pay more into like a health savings account for people. Oh, you'll see. Catch up on your friends. Okay, thanks. But I'm happy to have her give us some numbers. We could even do that if you'd like that for the November meeting. I can ask her to give us a couple of other plans. I mean, I do think we'd want to. I don't think it's going to save. I don't think we're going to get the level of what we get now for anything less.
Yeah.
But we could try to do it a different way. We could pay into a health savings account instead and see how that goes. I do know that a lot of our employees, and I could definitely talk to them again, but many of our employees have expressed that this is it's one of the reasons they came to work here, you know, because and to be honest, our employees deal with very high stress situations. We need them to go to the doctors. We have maintenance workers who have very physical jobs. They need to be able to go to the doctors, and we have staff who deal with very stressful situations on a daily basis. So it seems to be an important piece, but I'm happy to do more research for November. It won't hurt.
I don't necessarily, I'm satisfied that the Richards Group has looked at it, honestly. You know, I think it would be burdensome to have to do an evaluation every single year. But as long as there is a system in place to make sure it's competitive,
I mean, these were the recommendations. They give us recommendations every year, and this was what they recommended, so.
Well, I'm confident.
I mean, they didn't recommend the cost share. They recommend the plans.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'm confident with the recommendations of the Richards Group, having worked with them in various employments. So what would the board like to do? Do we want to vote at this time or wait until November?
I personally, I feel personally just to just get more input, like by November, just to see, even what you were saying, more options, because I mean, when it comes to health insurance, people should have that choice as well too, to say, you know, this is it, you know.
well, we have 3 plans that they can choose from, but we contribute to the Gold plan, and then the other plans, which are more expensive, they would have a higher contribution. So they are offered 3 different plans. Yeah.
Okay.
And those are recommended by the Richards Group.
Oh, okay.
But if you want additional information, I'm happy to get that from them.
I think just to see what those options, what they look like. You know, I mean, I'll still agree to this, but I just wanted to see what they had to offer versus this to see if that's okay. But I have no problem. Just, it was always good to have that.
More information is always better.
You know, I mean, I'm going through that now with Medicare, so, you know,
Okay.
you gotta know what's out there.
So anyone else would like the Richards Group to look into this further? Is there anyone else? Pat, Michelle?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'm just we'll have to make a decision in November because open enrollment is in November. So we'll have to decide then so that staff can figure out what they are gonna do for their families and themselves before they first, you know, and while it's still open enrollment. But we can do that for sure. Yeah.
All right. So we'll make a motion at that time. The next annual meeting is, our annual meeting is November 18th at noon at Clover Commons in the community room. It is open like all of our meetings, and so we encourage you all to participate if you would like. So if anyone doesn't have any more questions, we need to move into our public hearing. So I need a potential motion, a proposed motion for to open the public hearing to review the proposed HUD waivers for 2025-2026 moving to work supplemental plan.
A motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So the public hearing is now open, and this letter that we have here was sent to the residents and Section 8 participants on October 3rd, 2024. So that is what we're reviewing at this time. Is there any resident or community comments about this letter?
Well, I wrote something
Okay,
I'd like to read.
great.
And we have about 5 minutes per person, if that's okay. Okay, perfect.
It would really help me if I could stay seated.
Can you speak closer to one of these? Yeah.
Can't hear you, thank you. Yeah, the interpreter can't hear at all.
Okay.
I'm not very steady on my feet. I sprained and fractured my ankle. How is this? Better? Looks like it. Go ahead.
Are talking, we'll see.
Okay. My name is Nan Tierra, and I live with chronic Lyme disease. I've had long-term chronic Lyme disease since probably around 2001. And I wrote this short statement. Medical, dietary supplements, and acupuncture and Chinese medicine are the only treatments that have worked to control the symptoms of the chronic long-term Lyme disease I live with. This Lyme disease has affected every system in my body and my organs. These treatments, the medical supplements, the acupuncture, and the Chinese medicine has kept me in my home and out of the nursing home, which would be much more expensive for taxpayers and a way worse in quality of life for me. My physician is Dr. Denise Pasha of Maplewood Family Practice, and she is the person who originally referred me to acupuncture and Chinese medicine. She felt like there was not anything that Western medicine could do to help me anymore. And my health was really failing. At that time, I was living in the Samuel Elliott apartment because I needed an elevator and couldn't walk. I am shocked that the Brattleboro Housing Authority, it seems in this letter, it feels like the Housing Authority is saying they know more about treating the Lyme disease than my doctor. Finally, I was told last week by a Housing Authority staff person that the Housing Authority has responsibility only for providing homes and not for ensuring elderly and disabled people like me can stay in their homes. I really think that is absurd. What is the point of providing a home to people only to evict them the following month or months because they can't afford their rent if regulations like this go into effect? That's my statement. Respectfully, Nan Tierra. I have a beautiful Section 8 apartment close to downtown. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Is there any other comments or letters?
Hi, I'm Kathleen, and I understand HUD made a change from 3% to 10%. Did HUD make the change in policy about over-the-counter products?
No.
That is housing.
So this is a proposed change.
I would like to make my statement then.
Yeah. I thought you were asking me a question. I apologize.
Okay. I'm 69, I have arthritis, disc disc disease, osteoporosis. Medicare will not pay for anything. Vitamins that my doctor prescribed to keep my bones strong. I have to take Tylenol arthritis every day. There's other medicines, acid reflux, incontinence, and it's very expensive. I do very good audits. I get a doctor note to back my medicines. And I feel that this would also make me lose my housing. I would lose my housing. I can meet 10% without pocket expenses and regular mileage and co-pays and the things that you are accepting. But without the out-of-pocket expenses, which are monthly over $100, close to $2, I'm not going to be able to meet the threshold of the 30% rent. And this concerns me greatly. Greatly. I just lost my psychiatrist today that I've had for 15 years. She's closing business, no longer taking Medicaid, Medicare. Medicare will not pay for anything, even my my Prilosec, acid reflux, because you can buy it over the counter. So they decline everything. And yet, I have to have these. These are prescribed by a doctor. Is there a way that if you had a prescription with a diagnosis, why that these are necessary, that they could be included in the deductibles? That would be my question.
Or do you want me? I'm sorry, I wasn't sure. So if you have a prescription would be a deductible, but not an over-the-counter. So this is a proposal for the
Right,
2000.
but the prescriptions are denied by Medicaid. And so I have to take certain vitamins for my osteoporosis.
I hear you. So
I have to have incontinence products daily. It's expensive. I've already been to specialists, and that's what they suggested. No operation. So maybe not all over-the-counter products, but at least the ones that Medicaid will deny. And especially for senior citizens who have many more ailments. If that could be considered a different category, is my suggestion.
that's very helpful. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks.
That's great.
Can we also get a list sent out of what is accepted and what is not versus where the changes are being made? Because when this letter got sent out to different properties, some people were not aware of certain things that were deductions when I talked with certain residents.
Okay.
Like I had heard that protein powders were a deduction and or gym memberships. I'm not sure of the actuality of that, but I wasn't aware that that could be considered a deduction.
Okay.
And where those changes would lie within that.
Did you want to speak to that at all, David?
I guess What I have is a document from one of our Section 8 participants that couldn't be here. I'd like to read to the group. But if you want to
Just make a copy or email me or something.
readdress your question, what is it specifically that you were looking at?
I don't remember. It was, I think it was one of the RAC meetings where this policy was being proposed to be changed. And some of the items that were brought up, I wasn't even aware that they were,
Allowed.
yes.
I understand.
So do you have a readily available list of deductions that are allowed now versus what will not be allowed after the proposal change if it's accepted?
We do not have a
one?
specific list of, because it's different for everybody, and as long as they have in the past had a written recommendation from a licensed medical professional,
Okay.
those supplements or additions were verified. I think to get really specific, the IRS has a medical deduction chapter that really HUD guides us to use when we do implement the medical allowances. So that might be a start. Check the IRS site for medical allowances and see what they authorize and don't, because we follow that pretty closely.
And so
Am I understanding that with a doctor's note, the out-of-pocket, because the doctor is prescribing it, would be deductible?
That's the way it currently is, and we are proposing to have that changed. And that's what brings us here to this public meeting.
But there is a HUD rule that will change regardless if we don't make a change.
Correct.
And that is that it will go to 10%. So fewer people will meet that threshold. It might not be you, it might not be the two of you, but it will be other people. And so this would be a more equitable, because then more people would get a deduction.
Well, if you can't meet the 10%, then your emotional pay, your mileage, your co-pays.
If you can't meet the 10%, then you won't be able to do it. So
Right.
our proposal would be there would be no threshold, it would be 0. So everybody who had an expense could have it, but we can't do that and then have all these additional expenses. So that's why it was limited to insurance premiums, prescribed medications that you receive from a pharmacist. So that was what the proposal was. Because
they are going to 10% in April, no matter what.
They are, unless we ask for this waiver, which would then allow us to have more people, but we would have to cut back on some of the things we do. And so that's what the board is determining.
There would be a process of some deductions.
Oh, there will be definitely deductions. Like the biggest deductions people have are primarily, and I'll let David speak to this, are probably like supplemental insurance premiums.
Medical insurance premiums, co-pays, payments to meet your deductibles. Some folks need to have nebulizers or diabetic medicines as well. So those are examples that will be allowed to be used as deductions, but again, you need to look at the math and look at what 10% of your adjusted annual income is compared to what you are spending for out-of-pocket med expenses every month.
But if we went to this waiver, it would then be that
Only those that I just mentioned.
right, but you wouldn't have to reach the 10%.
Correct.
Yes. So this is sort of so we're in a situation. So it probably feels punitive to you. That's not the intention. The intention was we know that HUD is changing this policy, and we wanted to get in front of it because we knew that it was going to impact a lot of people. So we wanted to make it so that more people would continue to get would be able to continue to get a deduction. Right now it's set at 3%. It will go to 10%. So fewer people will get this, right? We can't change that. That's what HUD is determining, unless we accept a waiver.
Can you explain that 3 and 10% thing?
Sure.
It sounds like, it's like counterintuitive.
Right, so right now, the threshold is you need to have at least 3% of your adjusted gross income to then get, do you want to speak to it, David? You might be.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's a funky formula, so you have to expend at least 3% of your annual adjusted income in order to be eligible for any medical allowances.
So let's say that's $300.
So if it's 300, but it also depends on what is 3% of your annual adjusted income.
So let's say it's $300.
Then you're even and you don't qualify. Because you just told me 3% has to be greater than 3%. 3% is 300. If it was 301, okay. But the litmus test is it's got to be 3% currently. And HUD is now HUD has implemented as of April 1st, that threshold being 10%.
Which would be $1,000 in this scenario.
Yes, so that's going to exclude many other folks, even between 3 and 10%, and even those that pay above 10%. So we have discussed an equitable, let's be fair for everyone as we try to be every day. So what would be best for everyone?
So the same as, so these are moving to work waivers that we can apply for because we're a moving to work agency, because we applied to become one. So every year we get the opportunity to do things a little differently than the way HUD decides. But we don't have to do that. We could just follow the regular HUD rules. So for instance, like we've changed the LEAP program. We've changed in past years, we've changed the recertification process so that it's every 3 years, so that your rent doesn't increase every time your income changes, right? We knew that would support our residents, especially the ones that are working, because then their rent wouldn't go up and they could have more money in their pocket. So these are things that we're doing to try to support the people that we serve. We're never trying to do something to penalize people in this process. So this was a way of us saying, this is gonna impact a lot of people negatively. What can we do to address that? And so we're proposing this. The board doesn't have to decide this, and we might present it to HUD, and they might say, no, we'd rather just do the 10%. We're not gonna approve it. So we don't, but we can make this proposal because we found that it would be more people would qualify if it was 0 than if it's at 10%, a lot more. However, we can't do both. We can't have all of this large amount. And not every housing authority accepts all the things we do. We've been very generous over the years, right? So we are trying to, we can't do both with this. We have to have a limitation on it. And so it's really up to the board. We could say, we'll keep it the way it is and it'll go up to the 10% threshold and we'll just follow the HUD rule, or we look at doing it this way. I'll say that the only thing that might make you feel better is that there is a hardship policy. So we've already changed it so that we only do the recertifications every 3 years, which helps, right? Because once we do that, you don't have to do it every year. And then if people's income goes up, they don't do it until the 3rd year. So I don't know when your recertifications were last, but you'll be getting them done within the next 3 years. And then there's a hardship policy, which then says, because we know that there might be a hardship because of this, we'll allow you to do it one more time, which would give you another 3 years. So it wouldn't really impact you until we get to the next cycle, which would be potentially in 6 years.
But if I understand, the 10% is gonna go through in April, and then the rent would be, right?
The 10% will go through under the new HOTMA rule, and I don't think it's April. I think it might be July 1st.
I'm uncertain definitively.
Yeah, so we're still waiting on the regulation.
April 1st.
Yeah, we're still, this would be for our policy if we were to change our policy. So the HOTMA rule is coming. It got delayed once in one cycle. It might end up being April 1st. It might be, it might be April 1st. So
Right.
that's probably the soonest it would be. But it is gonna happen. I think HUD is just fixing, they have
their way.
they have a computer program that needs to be upgraded before we can do it, but it's happening. And so, so when we saw that, we thought that this would be a potential
So
way.
you want to bargain with them.
We try to be creative.
Right, there
We
we go.
try to have creative policies because to support our residents in this way. And so
Because it would allow, at 3%, at least it still is, the normal deduction.
right, it is going to go to 10% for all the housing authorities in the country. We, because we're special and we have a moving to work allocation, we can ask for a waiver, which would allow us to do something a little different. And this is our proposal. And it's great to hear your feedback, and you might say, we don't like your proposal, we want to do it the other way, but it's going to be one or the other. It's not going to be, we don't have a choice in that.
Right.
I'll say that
That's what I was
some of
trying to
some of the
understand.
things that have been really beneficial, I think the recertification every year, we've seen a huge increase in people, and this doesn't affect everybody, but people who are working, they've increased their salaries, their household salaries a lot, and their rent hasn't increased. It will increase eventually when they get recertified again, but that 3-year recertification process, even though we have to do a lot of work on the inside, still tracking information, it has been a huge benefit to a lot of our families and a lot of the people that we serve. I also think it's been a benefit to people who, the process is hard to do it every year. I think you can attest, right?
It is.
And so to do it every 3 years has made a big difference. So that was a waiver that we applied for. We applied for that waiver and we have to track and we have to make sure it's measuring what we're planning on doing.
So when will you know about the hardship waiver?
The hardship waiver is part of this. So if we approve this the way it's written, then there would be a hardship waiver which would say that you will, the next time you're recertified, you will still get to do it the way you've been doing it at the 3%, correct, David?
That is correct.
You'll get to do it exactly the way you've been doing it, and then when you recertify the next time in 3 years, that's when you would have to follow these new rules.
Right.
Does that make sense?
The 10%.
Nope. If we applied this,
It'll be the 3%.
there's no hardship policy for the 10%. HUD doesn't give you a hardship policy for that. 10% would just be as of this year. The hardship policy is only for the moving to work for the waiver.
So would the rent go up in April or whenever this is affected? Because the deductions affected my rent, so.
My answer would be no, because
No.
we wouldn't pick up on that
Until we do
adjustment
the
until your
recertification.
next annual re-exam, which would probably happen in 2026.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So you'll
that's-
have-
Yeah, so it would be your next recertification, then it would be at the 10%.
So we have time to plan.
Absolutely. And again, this is just a proposal. We
We're
haven't
not voting tonight, it's just.
received any blessings, but we're hoping as much that we will. We'll see.
And there are two other
Yeah.
policies that we'd like to change. One of them is,
Sorry, Christine?
Yeah.
Is there the other letter?
I do have a
Oh,
letter
yeah, I'm
from one
sorry,
of
yeah.
our other Section 8 participants regarding this proposal that VHP is making. It says, I believe I may offer a unique viewpoint as having been on both sides of the proverbial fence. I am currently a Section 8 recipient. After having been homeless for circa 12 years, I am now a tenant in good standing for decades. As per Policy 1, I vote yes. Well, Policy 1 is the one Christine was going to tell us about in a moment, about inspections in our own properties. This will protect the safety of the public as always our being number one concern and create accountability to all parties involved, protection from unwanted guests, gross exploitation of funds better used for policing, schooling, infrastructure, and in the training jobs. Policy 2, which was our adjustments Head of household, section 8 is vote yes, the only exemption being in desperate worst case scenario, last ditch cases is carefully managed by a physician and the other directly relevant parties involved. Policy 3, vote yes, sorry to be frank, but you quote, made your bed, now lie in it, unquote. If you cannot or will not provide physically or financially for your own, plenty of good qualified people can and will. Thank you again. A wise man once spoke of metaphysics, another perhaps even a wiser man taught, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime.
Thank you.
On the third one, it says paid child support will be excluded from income for rent calculations. Is that what he was talking about?
Yes, so we're proposing that if someone pays child support, right now, if you pay child support, we don't deduct that from the amount of money that your gross income. We just say that we don't deduct it. So this would take, if you pay child support, we would deduct that from your gross income.
Oh, yeah, it should be.
That's what
We
we're
feel that way
proposing, that's
too.
what we think would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not part of the HUD rules, so that's why we would be applying for a waiver. Yeah, for
I
that.
see,
Yeah.
I understand, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, and it is tricky, and I know number 2 is very tricky. It's a complicated situation for sure, so it's hard.
So, if you propose these, when will you find out response from HUD?
Thanks, Richard. So we would be, we're proposing it for the board. The board will vote on it in December.
Right.
I'm guessing they're gonna have a lot more questions, so I think it's great that you guys brought this up today because it's helpful for us to hear. They won't vote on it until December. At that point, we would have to submit it to HUD for it to be approved for April 1st of 2025.
So,
And we don't have to do all of them, right? We could do 1 and 3 and not 2, or the board could decide to do only 1 or only 3, this is just our proposal of what when we were looking at needs in the community and what we were hearing from people, we heard directly that people were impacted by the child support. So we wanted to address that by writing up a potential waiver.
and
We also, yeah.
Your proposal to HUD is, can we keep it at 3% if we don't do these?
Nope, it would be bringing it to 0.
Oh, and so all your,
So everyone who is an adult with a disability or who is a senior would be able to, if they have any expenses, they could submit them.
Any of these expenses?
Any of those expenses, yep. They wouldn't have to meet a threshold.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I like that. I mean, I don't like that I can't deduct
I know,
important
I know.
things.
Yeah,
But if I can at least deduct, some things, then I have a chance at meeting the threshold of rent.
and I don't know, I'm not gonna speak for David, but, or Courtney, but most people who have deductions are, I think it would be curious to see how much impact it would be. I can't make the assumption that some people won't be hugely impacted, but I don't know if we didn't have those, how much of an impact it would be, because it's not a direct dollar for dollar deduction.
Right.
It's, so sometimes people, and I can't speak for your cases because I don't know, I'd have to look at the paperwork myself, but sometimes people think that it's a huge amount that they're getting. and that it would make a big difference, and sometimes it's not a big amount, but it could be. And I think you might want to say to David, and he might not be able to give you exactly, but he might be able to say, well, if I didn't have all of these, what would it be? What would the difference be?
Right.
And it might not be more, it might not be as much as you think it is. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Sometimes.
No, 10% is what really
Yeah.
got me.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to avoid is that 10%, because I do know it'll just impact a lot more people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, the 10% is you spending more than 10% of your annual adjusted income. That is the formula. It's not 10% of what I have for money.
Right.
It's 10%, it's more than 10%. 10% is the threshold. If you expend more than 10%, then you would be eligible. If you spend 10 or 9, you will not.
Would that be all 3 years combined or 1 year? Because it's certification.
Certifications are now every 3 years, but as far as you're claiming any medical expenses is a calendar year. Or should I say 12 months, it could be from April to March.
Or October to October.
Those are 12 months as opposed to a calendar.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
I really appreciate you coming and letting us know. Thank you.
Yes, this is really valuable.
Thank you for listening, really. I mean, I truly appreciate it. I think maybe you're trying to save the something out of something that's going to be really dramatic. And if you can do that, that would be wonderful. Because we all, drive to the doctor and all that, and that all adds up. Yeah. So, commended.
Thanks.
I've got one question. Where does AWR fit in?
That's a great question. It doesn't in this, unfortunately, because unless you have a Section 8 voucher, if you have a Section 8 voucher, then it would qualify because David would be doing your recertification.
Housing choice or project-based, yes.
But the building itself, unless you have a project based in that building or a Section 8 voucher, then it won't impact you.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Correct.
I do have a question about Section 8. We as tenants that have been here for a long time can apply for a Section 8, right?
Yeah.
So I just need to do it.
Yeah, you can talk to David DeAngelis. You can call him up at the office, and you can talk to him, and he can talk you through the process. There is a process. It's a process.
And there is a wait list, but yes, you call me and we'll get into the weeds.
Okay.
It's always worth talking about it. It's nice to have options. And as much as we like to house you all, it's nice to have options to have that flexibility if it's not meeting your needs.
Right, the flexibility is what I was looking for,
Yeah, definitely talk to David about it.
Glad to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions or comments, I would like to propose that we close the public hearing.
Well, should we close the public hearing?
Second,
I second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so this will adjourn our Brattleboro Housing Partnership meeting.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So nice to see you. It's been a